Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say a few things up front, and then, of course, we'll take your questions. Well, when I woke up this morning, I did not expect to be speaking to you about international affairs, but something happened that is just, to me, very troubling and just wrong in every sense. President of the United States goes to England and before landing insults and attacks one of the key leaders of that country. He chose to attack Mayor Sadiq Khan of London, who I consider a friend, who is someone I respect and value greatly, who is doing extraordinary work on behalf of all of the people of London. He attacked Mayor Khan in a way that was insulting and demeaning, and sends a message to all the people of Great Britain that the President of the United States does not respect them, does not respect their choices, does not respect the democratic process of one of our great allied nations. But let's be very clear. What's happening here is part of a pattern. It's not normal. It's not okay to have the President of the United States attack duly elected foreign leaders on a regular basis. It undermines our standing in the world in a profound way because it goes to the heart of what people feel about this country when they see our president attacking who they chose to lead them. If that was all that was happening here, it would be bad enough, but it's worse because it's not even a veiled attack on Muslim people. It's a very purposeful attack on Muslims. To choose to attack one of the most prominent Muslim leaders on this earth, an exemplary leader in a Western democratic nation, someone whose story is one we all would admire, the son of a bus driver who worked hard and became the mayor of his hometown, a person who believes in unity and respect for all people. I know Sadiq Khan. I've spent a lot of time with him. I had him to dinner at Gracie Mansion. This is someone we should all respect, and our president attacked him in a way that was meant to demean. It was meant to demean all Muslims. So this has to end, and I'll tell you something. What President Trump is doing is making our country less secure because he's turning people all over the world against us. It's petty and it's nasty, but what it's really doing is showing that his insecurities as a person are making us insecure as a nation, and it has to end. Let me see, I'm going to speak about the situation here in Albany, but I wanted to say that first. If anyone has any questions on that first before we turn to what's happening in Albany.
You believe that this is because Mayor Khan is a Muslim?
Absolutely. We've seen this behavior from President Trump before. He reserves special glee for attacking Muslim people. And if you look at Sadiq Khan's leadership, including some very tough situations in London that he's handled with tremendous strength and dignity, there's nothing there to attack. President Trump thought that comparing me to Sadiq Khan was somehow a mutual insult. I'm honored to be compared to Sadiq Khan. I've seen the work he's done. It is deserving of great praise. But yes, it was a very purposeful effort by this president to continue to foster negative feelings towards Muslim people in this country and all over the world.
What did you make his comments against Meghan Markle? Do you think it's part of the same pattern?
Unquestionably. Look, the president obviously takes every opportunity to attack strong people who speak their mind, people of color who have strong views and don't believe in the status quo. I give Meghan Markle a lot of credit. She's been a voice of truth, and that's exactly the kind of person he takes on and tries to demean. Any other questions on this?
Sorry, Mayor,
please.
What do you think his goal was on this? Was it just to get the insult out there? Because what is it? He's not trying to get something from the mayor of London. What's the motivation?
I believe I've watched the patterns of Donald Trump now for decades. We all saw what he tried to do going back to the Central Park 5 decades ago when he called for their execution. He not only craves attention, He loves to draw attention away from his mistakes and problems and onto other things. So by attacking one of the most prominent Muslim leaders in the world, he takes attention off of his broken trade policies. He takes attention off the fact that he's ruining our alliances all over the world. He takes attention off the fact that his foreign policy is a failure. It's a classic distraction technique. I keep calling him Condon for a reason. It is bait and switch. We've all seen it. For all the good New Yorkers in the crowd, it's just like three-card Monte. It's bait and switch. But why on earth? Think about it. One of the great cities of the world, a democratic election chooses a Muslim leader. It's not a Muslim majority city. It's a statement of the kind of inclusion that we should all want to see in every society. It's their version of the American dream. A young man of modest means, his dad literally was a bus driver, immigrant family, could work his way all the way up to becoming a mayor of one of the great cities in the world. And he is respected as a unifier. Why on earth would the President of the United States go out of his way to attack the mayor of one of the most important allies we have, the mayor of the biggest city of one of the most important allies we have? Why would he do that? Because it's convenient to his politics of demeaning and dividing. Choose one of the most prominent Muslims in the world and attack him. That's what it's all about. All right, let me go to what's happening right here in Albany. Today I'll be meeting with legislative leaders. There's a lot going on in the final weeks here of the legislative session. I want to say at the outset, I want to express my admiration for Speaker Hastie and Leader Stewart Cousins. What they've achieved already this year has been remarkable. It's been historic. A lot more is going to happen over the next few weeks. This is going to be judged as one of the great legislative sessions in many decades. So I just want to say that I appreciate what they have done, and now we're going to push hard for even more before this session is over. First and foremost, my focus is on the rent laws. The current rent laws are broken. They're outmoded. They must be changed. The number one reform we need to protect affordability in New York City is to fix these rent laws. We've done a lot in New York City, the most aggressive and largest affordable housing program in decades, but we cannot go farther unless the rent laws of the state are fixed. I am very, very hopeful that we are on the verge of that. I think what we've seen is that under the current laws, some landlords, and I'm not saying the majority, but some landlords have used the loopholes to force tenants out, to find every conceivable way to jack up the rent on future tenants. That has led to a huge amount of loss of affordable housing. We have to stop that. The affordability crisis, unquestionably the number one issue on the minds of New Yorkers. So here we have a chance to get it right. End the vacancy bonus, end vacancy decontrol. Make sure that the MCIs and IAIs are handled properly, where tenants are not paying for anything more than the actual improvement itself. Adding protections for those who have preferential rent so that they don't experience massive rent hikes. Adding protections to stop inappropriate evictions. These are all on the docket. I think we're going to see all of these changes made. It's going to have a huge impact on millions of New Yorkers. So that's job one. I was on the radio on Friday and they asked me the priorities. I said rent, rent, and rent, and I really mean it. This is the single biggest, by far, issue on the agenda. A second, on the question of marijuana, we put out this report toward the end of last year. And if anyone has not looked at it, I really would commend it to you. It's very comprehensive. It talks about how to legalize marijuana in a way that is safe, that protects public health, public safety, but also does economic justice. The history is that because of laws, including the Crime Bill of 1994, we saw really draconian measures taken for low-level drug users, low-level marijuana users, that led to a huge amount of dislocation, a huge amount of pain for thousands and thousands of families. What we want to do is see those records expunged for low-level offenses. But beyond that, we want to see economic justice. We want to see a new marijuana industry that actually favors communities, that allows for maximum creation of community-based small business and jobs and wealth at the community level, particularly in communities of color that suffered so much from the previous marijuana laws. What we cannot tolerate is the creation of a new tobacco industry or a new pharmaceutical industry when you look at opioids. And if we can't put those protections in place, then we should not proceed until that day comes. I want to see legalization of marijuana for sure, but I want to see it done in a way that does not create a new monster corporate class that takes advantage of people, that profits in a very inappropriate way. Here's a chance, and in New York State we actually could do this, to overcome the mistakes of the past. If you think back about the tobacco industry and all the harm it caused Americans, imagine if we were going back decades and our state governments, our federal government has said, wait a minute, we want to make sure people's health is protected, and they had put the right protections in place from the beginning. How many hundreds of thousands of people would have lived? This is a different reality, but when it comes to this one, this is about economic fairness and justice and opportunity. We have a chance to get it right. It does not have to be a sector dominated by big corporations. It can be something very different, and New York State has the power to do that, and that's what I'm going to fight for. Also want to say on the specialized high schools, very simple. One test should not determine a child's future. I think there's standardized testing has been more and more discredited. We believe in multiple measures, and if you need proof of what's wrong with the current specialized high school system, look at Stuyvesant. 7 black students admitted in the last class for Stuyvesant. It's just not acceptable. I've heard more and more voices in Albany ready to embrace change and make real reform to the specialized high school admissions process, so we'll be working hard for that as well. And then a couple other things. We have an opportunity to take the very good reform which was achieved in terms of bail, and I absolutely agree with the legislature that it was right to achieve bail reform for lower level offenses. That is something necessary to end the era of mass incarceration, and we're working hard to make sure there are positive alternative ways to ensure that anyone accused of those lower level crimes can be handled in a different way. But I'm still concerned about those who are accused of much more serious and violent crimes. I still believe before this legislature leaves session, they need to take one more step, which is to allow our judges, particularly in the cases of the most violent and serious crimes, have the ability to assess the dangerousness of the suspect. Remember, there are some people who are profoundly dangerous, who have unfortunately a proven record of being dangerous to their communities, but are not a flight risk. In those cases, judges' hands are tied, and they do not have a ready way to hold them in the way they need to. We need to come up with a very precise definition of dangerousness so that it is not overused. But I think that's something that can and should be done while this legislature is still in session. And there's 2 more points, both with real economic ramification. One is we've made extraordinary progress in ensuring there's more and more opportunity for minority and women-owned businesses. We continue to aim higher and higher and get more and more opportunity in the hands of those businesses, but we are hamstrung by a state law that limits the threshold on the contracts that we can give. We want to see that discretionary spending limit raised to $1 million so that we can really intensify our efforts to reach minority and women-owned businesses. And lastly, this I think is one of the most common sense issues I've ever come across. Design build is not high profile, but it's high impact. We're talking about a methodology that saves across many construction projects, can save literally billions of dollars, can save years of construction time, much better for neighborhoods. They'll get what they are hoping for, the improvements quicker. They will avoid a lot of dislocation and noise. It is so basic, and I'm going to be talking to not only the legislative leaders, but to legislators about the impact on their own communities. Design build needs to be expanded for New York City. Whatever New York State has for its own agencies, New York City should have for our agencies as well. We can save a lot of taxpayer dollars. We can get work done a lot quicker. We made some progress over the last couple of years, but there's a lot more to do on design build, so that'll be another priority as well. So that's what I'm going to be focused on in the conversations today. And with that, welcome your questions. Yeah.
Have you thought more about the Good Cause Rent Bill, which would basically, or some version of it that would impose rent control across the state, not just focused in New York City?
Yeah. So look, I think the underlying impulse of let's make sure that it's harder and harder to evict anyone inappropriately or illegally. That's something I want to see action on for sure, not only for New York City, but for New York State. I believe rent regulation has been a real success in New York City. It's one of the reasons why, despite the rising costs, we still have a city for everyone. We still have an economically diverse city. I think it's more and more needed around this state and around this country to have some real checks and balances, some real ways of ensuring that affordability is consistent. So I favor efforts to allow localities around the state that want rent regulation to be able to institute it for themselves. Please.
On MWBE, do you support the elimination of the $3.5 million personal net worth requirement? Is that a reform you'd like to see?
I am not, I'll be always straightforward when I know the details of a particular proposal or not. That's not one I know enough about. What I am focused on right now is the threshold for discretionary spending by city agencies, which I think is so low as to keep us from being able to provide opportunity to a lot of very worthy firms. But I'll be happy to look at that issue, and we'll get back to you with an answer. Please.
The Assembly is seeking to outright ban MCIs and IAIs. Some of the members of the Senate are looking to do the same, whereas you're proposing to curb how much is carried off to tenants. Why is that?
I think this is about, first of all, determining what the priorities are in terms of affordability. I think it is ending vacancy decontrol, ending the bonus, addressing the abuse of preferential rents, and ensuring that tenants don't pay for more than any improvement that they receive. And that's the reality right now. There can be an improvement made to an apartment or a building, and the tenants not only pay their share of that improvement, but they pay for years thereafter for no apparent reason. So if we were to get that set of reforms, I think we would be in a night and day situation. I think it would be a huge step forward for fairness and affordability in New York City. At the same time, I believe we have a lot of buildings that have very tight margins, and ensuring that improvements are made, but justly, is in the interest of everyone. We don't want our building owners to stop investing in their buildings. We want them to keep making sure they're a great place for people to live. But I'm sick of seeing tenants gouged, which is what the current law has allowed for many years. So I think a common sense answer that says you only pay for your share of the improvement and nothing more, and you stop paying once it's paid off, is the right way to go.
Can you speak a little
Please.
bit about how you're balancing your presidential campaign as well as running the city at the same time?
Sure, I think it's very straightforward for me. I'm in my 6th year as mayor. This is the 6th time I've come up and been a part of the legislative process, the budget process, et cetera. Here, it's my 6th time around with the city budget process. At this point, I'm very familiar and comfortable with everything I got to do and my team's got to do. We have a veteran team. Most key members have been with me the whole time. And we're able to make the decisions, get the job done, while I can travel and do the other work I have to do as a presidential candidate. And I'm also very used to making decisions wherever I am and addressing any issues that come up. I've traveled before, obviously, and the glory of modern technology allows me to be on a conference call on a moment's notice anytime, anywhere, and address whatever issues come up. And I've found that we can strike that balance effectively.
Aside from the issue of the rent increases being permanent increase for tenants through the MCI and IAA programs, there's also been allegations of fraud within those programs, landlords charging way more for the renovations than they actually cost. How do you fix that aspect?
Enforcement. One of the things that's historically been true is that the state has not had the strongest enforcement mechanisms or sufficient resources put into them. I'd like to see a lot more. Look, we're at a historic moment. We have a chance here to make these laws the strongest they've ever been in the middle of the greatest affordability crisis we've ever had. That's fantastic. We have to make sure the enforcement mechanisms are there to go with it. I'll tell you, at the city level, we've taken the laws we have, like the Rent Guidelines Board, and we've used them in ways that have never been done before. We found, based on the facts, there were 2 years where a rent freeze was called for, and we put it in place, and we made sure that landlords abided by it. And that had a huge positive impact on working families. So it is one part pass the right laws, but you have to have the teeth and you have to have the enforcement mechanisms to go with it.
Does that mean giving more financing to HCR or
I think it is a mandate to HCR to ensure that it's very easy for a tenant to bring forward any concern or complaint, and that there's fast follow-up, and that HCR has the personnel necessary, and that the strategic approach, especially in the beginning after the law is passed, is to show by example that landlords will not be allowed to abuse the new law. If it's like everything else in human life. The first year or two is when people receive their signals and their messages. I would say the state has to come out of the gate very strong after these laws are passed and show that the enforcement is very fast and intense and consistent. Yes?
Can you just clarify what you mean about the dangerousness in bail? Would you want to see dangerousness for the low-level charges that will now be presumptively released, or do you want to see dangerousness for the
Upper level, I share the concern of some in the legislature that if it's not formulated in a very specific fashion, there could be misinterpretation, there could be overuse of the concept. What I'm concerned about is there are times when a judge sees a pattern in a defendant where they have, for example, violated parole on a regular basis or committed a series of violent acts that have been confirmed, there's been convictions. When you have a case like that and the judge doesn't have the ability to hold them in because they're not able to substantiate they're a flight risk, judges' hands are tied. I appoint judges in New York City, and I've had this conversation in many a judicial interview, and they raise this concern that it's not typical, but sometimes they are confronted with that situation and they need more tools. I would say it should be pegged to very specific, high-level, violent, serious offenses. Yeah.
Governor Cuomo basically said he doesn't believe that there's enough time to craft legislation in the next 11 days of the legislative session to legalize marijuana. You seem to have an opposite take, so do you think that this could get done for New Yorkers this year?
I am hopeful. Obviously you all are up here and I don't spend as much time here, so I know it is far from a sure thing. But I do want to refer back to this. We put this out 6 months ago, explicitly to help and support the members of the legislature as they thought about different options. And this is based on the experience of a lot of the states that did legalize and what worked and what lessons were learned. So, excuse me, so I believe after so much examination, there still is time to get it right. But I would say it's very important to ensure that it's right and that what is done ensures economic justice. If, for example, the law says that localities will get to decide a lot of the local implementation, we can take that mandate and use it as a way to ensure that the industry in New York City is not a big corporate industry, but one that's community-based and small business focused. If we share in some of the revenue, we can ensure that that revenue is recycled back to communities that have suffered the most. So, not every detail has to be resolved in the last 11 days for there to be an effective piece of legislation. The legislation can set us on a path with a set of ground rules and standards, and then let us at the local level figure out a lot of the details of implementation. But it has to focus on economic fairness, please.
Just a kind of a follow-up, because you and the governor know each other as only people who've known each other a long time.
Yes.
And I didn't hear you in the beginning mention his name when you talked about how Speaker Hasty and Stuart Cousins were working hard at the end of the session. So are you going to meet with the governor today? Do you believe that the governor's agenda for the end of the session is correct? And sort of what is your message vis-a-vis his message?
So let me several pieces there. I think it's fair to say on many issues in the last 6 months, the governor and I have agreed. We obviously agreed on the MTA plan and congestion pricing. We agreed that legalization of marijuana was necessary with the right rules. I think there's a broad agreement on a number of areas, and that's good. The meetings I'm having today are with the legislative leaders. My team is in constant conversation with the governor's team. I talk to the governor off and on at different points depending on the issues that come up. But my meetings today are specifically with the legislative leaders, and that's why I framed it about really appreciating how far they've already come this session and how much more I think will get done.
Mayor, you pledged support for the 5-cent paper bag fee in New York City. A lot of county leaders across the state have taken the opposite stance in their counties. A, why do you support that fee? And B, what would you say to county leaders who have taken the opposite stances?
I think I appreciate anyone who is concerned about an additional fee, although I think we can all agree a 5-cent fee is modest in the scheme of things. But look, we have to change our patterns here. And we are still living in a throwaway culture. I'm struck every time, I go anywhere to get food that the norm in this state and in this country is you get a whole lot of paper and plastic and you throw it all away. And we got to get away from that. And the use of paper bags, it's just not necessary. It's not something that was the norm in this country until relatively recently. People used to use reusable, recyclable bags all the time. So that's what we have to get back to. So what I see is that a small fee allows us to both discourage the use of paper bags and have a funding source to be able to provide people with those permanent reusable bags that are just much better for the environment. So that's where I like to see us go. I'll do a few more. Go ahead.
Mayor, are you supporting the driver license for undocumented?
I do. Yeah.
Did you talk with about that with the leaders?
I'm going to see them now, and it's certainly something I've been very, very public about my support, and I'm happy to reiterate it. I just, as part of my presidential campaign, I've been in other states, and one of the states I've been in is Nevada, which historically no one would have considered a progressive or democratic state. It has become more democratic recently, and certainly at least a purple state now. And in Nevada, they made a decision to ensure that undocumented folks would have that opportunity as a matter of safety and fairness. And it's just as true here in New York. When you exclude people from the opportunity to have a license, even though they live in our communities, work in our communities, they're our neighbors, you exclude them from a license, all you're going to do is create less safety on the road and obviously undermine the ability of a family to make a living. So to me, this is common sense. And the reason I invoke Nevada is, to all the New Yorkers who think somehow this is controversial, look around the country at the places that are already providing licenses regardless of documentation status. Please.
Mayor, if you could respond to the federal monitor who's talking about Catherine Garcia and whether or not they're up to lead remediation where they should be, and perhaps even he suggested could have misled the council.
No, I think it's quite clear that Catherine Garcia spoke honestly and accurately. I have a lot of respect for the monitor. We've had a good working relationship already. And in his latest communication, he made clear that he anticipates a good working relationship, as do I. I think his assessment of her testimony was not right, with all due respect to him. The efforts to ensure the kids are protected and lead issues are addressed are more extensive than ever. They're fast, they're focused. We're going to 135,000 apartments to once and for all know if there's lead there or not. And by the way, as that initiative has begun, we're seeing a very high percentage of apartments that do not have lead, thank God, and that's going to allow us now to focus our efforts on those that do. So I disagree respectfully, but much more importantly, I think we'll be able to work together. Yeah.
Mayor, the Daily News this morning had a story about the tech department being overcharged millions by a company setting up a procurement system for the city.
Haven't seen that, so I'd be happy to comment when I've seen it, but I haven't seen it. Okay, one more.
Mayor, the governor said today they didn't think there's going to be time for climate change legislation. There's a bunch of bills. Is this a missed opportunity? What are you thinking about this session going by?
Look, I think the state, I want to give the governor credit. He has been very focused on climate change, and I think the state has come a long way. There's more to do for sure constantly. We're implementing the Green New Deal in New York City, and I believe that is the right broad template. I agreed with the governor on rejecting the Williams pipeline. I think that was the right thing to do. So there's some real areas of agreement, and New York City, I think, is showing that localities can go a lot farther. I would say, and I must be clear about, I'd need to know about the specific pieces of legislation to give you a more precise answer. But the state is broadly on the right track. We should never miss the opportunity to get something done on climate change if there's a specific moment where we can do something, because we are running out of time. I do believe that UN estimate that the next 12 years are crucial, needs to be taken seriously. But I'd have to see the specific legislation to give you a more tangible answer.
Mayor,
Yeah.
back to really quick.
Last one.
We're 2 years into the lead crisis. Why is it still taking so long to resolve this issue?
Again, I would argue to you that the work that's being done now is what should have been done decades ago. When you think about the fact that, and the city's paying for this and we're paying for it very willingly, this is a decision I made separate from any issue regarding the federal government. We're going to once and for all know every single apartment that has lead, and we're going to find, and we know this already, a lot of apartments that never had lead at all, and yet they got inspections and they were constantly a source of a lot of expenditure when they never should have been. We're going to be able to now, once and for all, know every single apartment in public housing that has lead. That's going to allow us to concentrate all our resources on addressing those issues once and for all. And there's tremendous focus and resources. You've never seen anything like this. And by the way, exposure to lead has gone down 90% in New York City since 2005. 90%. It's going down rapidly now. And very few of the cases, thank God, are in NYCHA. The big challenge now is private housing. And Catherine Garcia, who also has the role of our quote-unquote lead czar, put out an extraordinarily aggressive plan, there's nothing like it in the whole country, to go at lead everywhere, and most especially in private housing. And that's where we're going to make the biggest difference going forward. Thanks, everyone.